Welcome to the Championship Club podcast. I'm your host Michael Casey, and co-hosting with me is a man with over 300 Championship Rugby appearances. It's Ben Gulliver. Be sure to check us out on social media at Champ Clubs Pod on Instagram and Twitter, and head to YouTube to like and subscribe to the channel. Before we kick off today's episode, I'd like to say a big thank you to our brand new and shiny sponsor, Trojan Engineering Fabrication, part of the MFH Group, and you can check them out at mfhire.co.uk. Welcome to the Championship Clubs podcast. We are back again following a weekend of no fixtures, so a rest week for the Championship, but back in action this Friday. Gully, have you enjoyed the week off? Have you found yourself, desperately out of sorts this weekend with no Championship rugby to enjoy?
No, mate, I've managed to get to the hairdressers actually and have a haircut, and I think they've done quite a good job considering where my barnet's at the moment. So quite happy with the haircut. I'd see that it's a bit controversial, but I saw obviously there's the social media blackout, wasn't there, the other weekend, and that obviously has gone really well because I went back on Twitter today and it's rife again. So I'm not sure how much use that's done, but I can sort of see it from everyone's why it was done, and hopefully it's a good cause for change. But yeah, Twitter's sort of alive again with rugby news and things that are going on in and around sort of Champ Rugby and also sort of Prem Rugby. So it seems like there's a bit of a more focus on the game again, which is what I've been getting myself into a little bit this week and seeing what's going on around the league with the fixtures back on this weekend. There's some quite interesting fixtures coming up.
And of course, obviously, one of the biggest talking points in rugby has been the line selection. I know that we kind of touched on our Championship Lions team last week prior to the announcements. Any thoughts on the selection? Of course, 5 current Championship players will be going to South Africa on tour.
Yeah, the one that sticks out for me is Ali Price. Obviously, I know Pricey from his time at Bedford, and it's not very often you get to see someone go from their very sort of embryo of their career all the way through, and it's amazing to see how well he's done. Really pleased for Price. He's such a good lad, and fair play to him. And the selection, I think, is a pretty fair reflection on form within the league. I'm really looking forward to it, and I was really positive about sort of something we touch on. Is like rugby doesn't get sort of mainstream media that often, and when the Lions comes around every 4 years, it generates a real excitement. And obviously with everything that's been going on this past year, it's great and something for everyone to look forward to. So really excited about watching that, and obviously really pleased for some of the guys that we know within the squad. It's great for them.
Action, I agree, and I think Ali Price has got to be in a shot with playing in the Test. Some of his form this year for Glasgow and Scotland has been scintillating. But back to the action in the Champ. We've got 5 games this weekend. Kicks off with Bedford welcoming Ealing to Goldington Road. On Saturday, Jersey Reds welcome Coventry. Richmond have got Nottingham. It's Pirates versus Hartpury at the Menai. And then on Monday, in front of fans, Saracens welcome Ampthill. What are your highlights? What are your picks from this weekend's fixtures? Well, this weekend and Monday's fixtures, Gully.
I'm just going to rattle it out and I'm just going to call them, I think, just because I was going to go. So Bedford, Ealing, obviously I think Bedford will go all right for a period in the game. But you've got, I think, fancy Ealing for a 5-point win there. Then on Saturday, the one that sticks out is the Richmond-Nottingham game. 2 teams that have been battling a little bit this season. So it'd be interesting to see which way that one goes. I quite fancy Richmond to turn them over. Jersey, as we've said, their season started. Everyone's dropping in on the day, as Jersey was doing on the away games and losing at the start of the year. Now everyone's having to go in on the same day and do the same over there. And I think it'd be a tough ask for Cov. Fancy Pirates against Hartpury. And then you've got Ampthill, Sarries on Monday, where Sarries, obviously, we know all about Sarries. And I think we mentioned on a previous pod that we weren't even sure if Ampthill would be in the league this year. And after a successful crowdfunder, they're now winning it. So great for them. Great that supporters are back in. But I do fear for Ampthill a little bit. But they've proven a few people wrong over the years, and they beat Pirates a few weeks ago. So who knows? If they can pick up a bonus point try there, I think that'll be a great success for Ampthill. So yeah, exciting weekend of sport, and obviously coming out of lockdown Monday is going to be great. And obviously delighted to welcome this week's guest, which I know you're going to introduce properly because I've just ruined that.
No, I was wondering how I was going to go on to it, but as you say, we thankfully it isn't just you and I, otherwise our listenership would drop off a cliff, and I'm delighted to say that we are welcoming onto the show Ben Mercer, formerly of Plymouth Albion and Cornish Pirates, and then went on to France to play for Rouen, Normandie, and has subsequently, since retiring from the game, gone on to become an Amazon bestseller with his book Fringes, Life on the Edge of Professional Rugby. Ben, it's a pleasure to have you on the Championship Clubs podcast.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey Ben, how you doing, mate? We just spoke just off before the show. It's like your beard's looking good, mate. You look like a different man.
I feel like a different man. It's like I like to pretend it's for a sort of proper rebrand, but it's just a lockdown thing. It's the first time in my life I've been able to grow an acceptable beard, so it's like I'll just see how far it goes.
Looking sharp, mate. So whereabouts in the world are you based now, mate? Are you still West Country, or are you?
Yeah, just outside Bath at the minute. But obviously been locked down like everybody else. Not been much fun, but what can you do? Yeah,
we often sort of talk about sort of experiences within the league. Just thought if you touch on sort of some of the challenges you face when your time at Championship clubs. I know you faced a few sort of during we've crossed paths a few times over the years, and some of the positive experiences that you had within the league, and just if you could share a few of them with us, that'd be great. And use it as a start with.
Yeah, I mean, so I was in the academy at Bath, and then I went off to Newcastle University to do a degree. So I got involved with the academy set up there and played similar stuff. So I played A-League rugby for the most part and got loaned out to Blaydon, who were in National 1 at the time. We had a great backline. We had loads of good players. We had good guys in the forwards too. We had Scott Riddell in the back row, who went on to play for Scotland. Will Welsh, he was down on loan with us, and he's now obviously pretty senior at Newcastle. Then we had Mickey Young, Rory Clegg, guys like that. Andrew Fenby on the wing was really amazing, and he went on to have a really good career, kind of Scarlets and Irish and stuff. So, but my intention was always to kind of use that as like a springboard into a championship deal, or whatever I could get really. And I was really excited. I was really excited to sign for Plymouth Albion. It was my first time, having been in and around full-time rugby environments since I was at school. It was my first time to be like, right, I've got no studying. This is it. I can commit to it. And I was pumped to get down to Plymouth, and it was a bit of a shock considering the sort of difference in facilities.
Who was coaching?
Oh,
I know the answer, but I want you to.
We could do a whole podcast on this, but Graham Dorr was director of rugby, and it's actually a fond memory of mine as well. I got an agent, so this agent found me a deal at Plymouth, and I was up at uni. I flew down to Bristol, and then my agent picked me up, drove me down to Tiverton Services, where I met Graham for the first time. And then he sort of quizzed me on a variety of gameplay scenarios and what I do. And he seemed to find those answers satisfactory, because he sent me a contract after that. So I met him just off the motorway.
Mate, I got a similar one. I think that's how he did all his businesses in the services. I met him with Jimmy Moore, that used to play winger for Cov. We both went down in the same car. Our agent hooked up. Met him at Exeter Services.
Oh, you went a bit further, right?
We went a bit further. We're in Coventry, so not as far, was it? So, and all I got told from my agents was, make sure you look him in the eye when you shake his hand. That's all you need to do. So I went there and was like, right, Graham, shitting himself a bit, shook his hand. Didn't speak to me again. Jimmy Moore got absolutely peppered. Like you say, as a back, scenarios. Like, what do you do in this situation when you're 3 points down, you have a penalty with 5 minutes to go? Like, bless him, and like Jimmy came out of it. He's broken man. I got a contract, and Jimmy ended up moving down to Pirates. It was bizarre, but like you say, you can do a whole podcast on Dawsey. He's different level, but good memories. It's a good setup, mine, wasn't it? But back then, sort of, it was full time rugby, like you said.
Yeah, I was really excited. We had loads of good players, and that first year I was at Plymouth, we did pretty well. So we ended up, the setup was different, but we got into the top 8, which meant we're in the playoffs. And once we're in that, then everyone was loving it. So Graham was really happy. Completely eased off in training, which wasn't like him. So the last sort of 6-7 weeks or so of the season, where we played all the better teams. So we had Bristol in our group, and that year was actually the year Bristol lost to Exeter in the final, and Exeter got promoted. But it meant the last few weeks of the season were kind of pretty relaxed for us, and we spent the time sort of, going to pub quizzes and having a great time around Plymouth, and then playing the more exciting teams to play against in the league. So yeah, it was all good.
So did you go from like a uni contract straight in? Did you have a contract when you were at Newcastle, and like sort of, or was that your first full time?
Plymouth was my first like proper deal. So at Falcons, like, they had some guys on a proper contract, but because there were 3 universities in their catchment area, and they had Tyndale, Blaydon, and Darlington Moden Park, so they could just have a lot of young lads. They knew if you were at uni there that you were sort of there for 3, however many years, 3, 4, 5 years, and there was a big pool of players they could dip into. So it was good. Like the local kind of club rugby was a good level, all being National 1, and you're getting paid by them to play on the weekend, really. So Falcons could kind of pick off anyone who did well, at the end of their degree. And if not, they'd, you'd come in for training, but you never quite knew what you were doing. So sometimes there'd be 6 of you and you'd be doing circuits in the gym with Mark Wilkinson, Johnny's older brother, who's the conditioner, or you'd be in a full first team session with, Matt Burke and people who are really good. So you try and not look like an idiot for, an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So how did the first experiences moving to Plymouth compare to what you've been used to up in the environment at Kingston Park?
Sessions were a lot longer, I'd say. I went into a club flat. So there's 5 of us in this house. It was probably, it was definitely too small for us. We didn't have anywhere to all like sit and eat at the same time. But we had a good group in there. George Porter, Steve Johns, Rory Cushion, and we had Rory Watts-Jones, but he left, and we had Mark Lee as well, who was a young guy, came from Whitebridge College. Schlee?
Yeah. What does that mean?
I think it was Shit Lee, which is a bit unfair. It's a bit unfair because actually he was straight out of school, and he ended up like starting at fullback most of the year. He had a great goal kicking game away at Bedford, so it was kind of affectionate. But he was quite a character.
And then you had George Porter in there with when he had his lovely flowing locks. Who's just actually made his debut for Hartpury over the last few weeks, so he's back in the league grinding.
I did see that. I've actually not seen George since his rebrand. Since becoming a peanut, as we call it. But he was hilarious to live with, and he'd never seen things like sweet potatoes or vegetables really in general. He didn't know what they were to begin with, and but then he became quite a gourmand in the end. So he's really. I think he even bought a Barber jacket at one point, which was quite a departure for him.
Not for someone from Matson in Gloucester. That's very posh for him.
And obviously, then from Plymouth to Cornish Pirates. Let's talk about your time down at the Menai. Overall, enjoyable. How was your time as part of the Cornish Pirates setup?
I didn't love it, to be honest. I turned up in October time, and the sort of tone for the season had already been set, and I was really excited about going there because the previous 2 years, Pirates got to the final. They played great rugby. A lot of guys went there and went really well and kind of moved on to a better level. So I was like, this is great. This is a great opportunity for me. I did have a little bit of a nagging hip problem when I got there, but nothing too bad. So I was immediately into training and playing. But everyone was knackered because they'd had these 2 years where they played all the way through to the final. The director of rugby had gone, and so had some of the lads. And then we had a great squad. That was the other thing. We had loads of good players and great guys. So it was a really good bunch, but we just never quite kind of got it together on the field. And we had some great results. I think we beat Bristol pretty handsomely on Boxing Day, and we had some decent games, but we didn't manage to kind of get consistent at all. And we came 5th or 6th in the end. It was slightly disappointing. So I felt like we were better than we managed to put out, on the pitch. But you can't do that every year, can you? I suppose.
What's interesting is that is that the year that you had your trial at Bedford as well? When you the year before. Yeah. Because you joined in October, so that's sort of just wondering how that sort of transpired. So why was it a late sign-in basically?
So I was at Plymouth. The first year went brilliantly for me personally, and for the team it went pretty well. I was top try scorer in my first year, and got Young Player of the Year in the end. And then the second year we were just like a little bit worse. We had a budget cut. We had a couple of guys leave, but the guys that came in were like, bit of a mixed bag, and we weren't as good. And we just finished just out. We missed the playoffs, and we got in they had a relegation playoff that year. That was a bit bizarre, but similarly, we kind of got secure with a few games left, and it felt like it was kind of petering out, and our budget was going to get cut again. And at the time, I had a couple of like move. I was talking to different teams. So I thought I had a move lined up. So I was like, right, well, I'm out of here, kind of thing. And it never materialized. So I was just left like, oh, what am I going to do? And there's a lot of like ships in the night sort of things with different clubs. And I was like, I didn't really know what to do. And it was a really difficult time. In the end, I ended up going to Sydney initially just for a few months just to play club rugby. But in the end, I really enjoyed it. So I stayed there for almost a year in the end. And Pirates phoned me while I was out there and said, what are you up to? And my visa was almost up. So I was speaking to the Aussies and I was like, look, guys, I've got this offer, but if you can kind of cobble me together something here that means I don't have to go and work on a farm for 6 months, then, kind of be interested, I'm in. And, but they didn't do anything in the end. And he was like, mate, I'll get you a job. But never happened. So I was like, well, Pirates it is, pal. See you later.
Lessons learned there. Get something on the table before you get...
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, let's have that contract on the table before I go, oh, yeah.
And
yeah, exactly.
Then was it as sort of similarly, I guess, a move out of necessity, or how did the move to France come about? Or was it sort of as unplanned perhaps as the move to Pirates, or was that something that was a little bit further thought out, Ben?
I'd say it was like less thought out than the move to Pirates. So, because at least with the move to Pirates, I had like weeks considering it.
Were you in New Zealand this time, mate?
I was. What was I doing? Yeah, I finished up at Pirates, and I was thinking like, right, I could have gone back there on similar terms, but I was thinking, well, I don't know. I was in my mid-20s. I was like, look, you've had a little run at this, and as probably a lot of championship rugby professionals can appreciate, it's not necessarily the foundation for a sustainable long-term career. And I had a degree, and I thought, do I go and do something else? Do I go and do a Rosslyn Park and, get a job and play part-time? Or do I go abroad and do the kind of Hong Kong thing, go there and do a similar sort of arrangement? And I was sort of, that's when I stayed with you, Gully, and we had a couple of weeks training at Bedford. And then, and then I got a phone call from Richard Hill, who'd recently left Worcester, and he was taking over at Rouen. And it had been a long-held ambition of mine to play in France, so I was always keen to go. I never imagined it would be Fédéral 2, the sort of fourth division. But I was like, once I kind of had everything, and I was talking to London Welsh, but they wouldn't commit to a firm offer. They wanted me to go and train. And I was thinking, right, well, you wanted to go to France, and here's a sort of way there. And he sold it to us as a sort of year in this division with Rouen. And then there was a few other English guys signing at the same time. And he was like, well, we'll have a good year, and then we'll all like bugger off to the south somewhere warmer. And we're like, sweet, sounds good. So yeah, signed that, went there, packed 2 little bags and got my EasyJet from Bristol. And and I stayed there for 4 years in the end. So it was pretty good.
Yeah. Been an unbelievable story what Hilly's done over there, isn't it?
It is crazy. I mean, like when we turned up, no one even knew there was a rugby team. Like even local people didn't know there was a rugby team there. And now they're in Pro D2. The whole thing is kind of crazy. But by the same token, there's a lot of teams in France who have done that. So if you actually look at Pro D2, a lot of those teams are teams we used to play against in the lower division. So Van are now like pretty high up the league. They've got Nick Benton in there now, and Darren Barry, and I think Henry Trinder's just gone there as well. So Van were kind of in our pool, and we, they were kind of a little bit ahead of us on that journey. Never, they were another team who were like probably a few years ahead of us, and the other one's Angoulême, Sawyer Angoulême, and I think Robin Copeland, who's a bit of a championship warrior. He's at Sawyer Angoulême now. So yeah, it's all those teams. They were all kind of doing the same thing, and you could see, even though Rouen it is a kind of amazing story, you could see there's genuine possibility in France. If you do get a team like that, you can, make your way up there, and a few teams are testament to that now.
It's quite interesting because I mean, if you look at the current championship, I think there's a lot of teams that you could compare similar journeys. You know, you look at Ealing, we're not talking that long ago that they were playing in sort of National 3, London and South East. Jersey similarly flown through the leagues as have Ampthill. And I mean, if we go back a little bit longer, Doncaster did something very similar, coming from, I think it was Yorkshire Division 2, the 8th or 9th flight, to being in the second tier. But obviously then a lot of these teams, that last step eludes them because of the way the structure is. You've kind of referenced it there, and I know we've had Pete Lydon on the show, who's at Rouen now, and obviously playing in front of the, maybe not the moment, but the big stadiums in what looks a fiercely competitive Pro D2. Now that you've kind of stepped back and you're no longer sort of in the setup, what do you make, having played in both? And do you think that what do you think fuels the sort of that ability to ascend all the way through the French pyramid that we don't quite have here in the Championship and in the English pyramid?
Yeah, I think that's quite tough. It's quite a tough question. Like,
never going to be an easy ride coming on the show. Come on, you know.
I think
it gets there in the end, mate, as well. That was a question.
Gully might disagree, but before I felt like there was a lot less mobility between the Premiership and the Championship, because the Premiership, everyone had much bigger squads. And I remember being a young, academy kid at Bath, and they'd go out and sign like a kind of Kiwi late 20s guy to be the third or fourth scrum half. And, he'd probably be on a decent salary, but like now that just wouldn't happen. They'd just get an academy kid, or they'd go to the Championship and find, someone 24, 25 at one of those teams who look quite handy, and bring them up to the Premiership. And I think there's more mobility now as a player between the two things. I'd say, like with Pro D2, the money's just much better. There's no contest. So, and even in Fédéral 1, which is the third division, so that'd be like National 1, never had a Samoa World Cup fullback on 15, 20K a month with a house and a car. So it's just no contest, and then Pro D2, I mean, there are teams that have gone D2 up to top 14, like Lyon, they're up at the top. La Rochelle are obviously in the European Cup final. They got promoted from Pro D2 the first year I was in France. And, some of the international players that will sign for a Pro D2 team. I mean, Carl Ferns did it. He signed for Lyon in Pro D2. Yeah, I mean, like, people will go down to Pro D2. The money's better, the level. It probably is better just because of the talent, but yeah, the sort of professionalism of the setups is like to be questioned. But some of the facilities are incredible. Like Zach Henry would be a good guy. Like, he was at Nevers and they had an amazing kind of training setup. That places like Rouen, they'd like to get that in place, I think. But they, there are some of those French teams just with outrageous setups that you just can't compete with when you're down the Mene in the gym with a hole in the floor and stuff like that.
I think like the ability for Championship players to go up is still there. I think where it's changed massively sort of over the past sort of 5-10 years is the guy coming back down. So you're talking you've gone from an average wage 6-7 years ago to 40K in the Prem to now 80 to 100 grand. Now you're looking at earning between max 20 and 30K in the champ now. So it's really difficult to attract players into a squad where the finances of all the clubs are struggling. So you don't get that quality of player coming back into the league. You have to go and find it elsewhere, which obviously then affects like the long-term project of the league. So we've spoken a fair bit about how the funding options could work in the league, and it's very complex, obviously. But that seems to be the biggest shift within the league, I think, is those fringe Prem boys coming back down. I was chatting to Chris Morgan recently at Pirates, and he's mentioning sort of a couple of players that have been offered, and sort of the level of money they're on with not a great deal of rugby in the bank. You can't get near it at the Pirates, but that's just the nature of it at the moment. So you just got to try and think outside the box a little bit to attract these type of players. To hopefully then, like I said, because you can go up, it's difficult to get the guys coming back. And Darren Barry's just moved to France, hasn't he? Because of that reason. Yeah. So you lose someone out of the league that could potentially be in it, has now gone elsewhere.
That's actually interesting because when I signed for Plymouth, I was like 22, and I did feel like a young player in the league. Like everyone was quite experienced, and even the teams that weren't necessarily like Exeter or Bristol, every single team had some like what you'd call, a senior professional. When you look at it now and having gone and watched, former teammates or mates of mine kind of who might still be involved, like, the league just skews a lot younger, doesn't it, in general? Yeah. Whereas before, you did get a sense of like, well, there is sort of every age of rugby professional kind of represented here. And now it does seem like a younger league, which, in general, I'm not against that. I think if it was expressly like for developing players, then great. But at the minute, it seems like, the sort of aim of the whole thing is not clear. So it's like, well, it seems like you're kind of wasting assets in every direction, if you understand what I mean.
Exactly,
the examples of players moving up from the Championship to the Premiership, it's constant. We've just announced today, Bomber Hislop, one of our props, will sign for Wasps next year. But obviously the thing that doesn't happen is really the clubs moving from the Championship to the Premiership. That's perhaps the difference. You're listening to the Championship Clubs podcast. It's competition time. Thanks to Printable Promotions and Kappa, we're giving away 2 tickets to the European Challenge Cup final between Leicester Tigers and Montpellier at Twickenham Stadium on May the 21st. To find out more and to enter, head to @ChampClubsPod on Twitter and Instagram. So Ben, obviously following your time at Rouen, you're a couple of years into retirement, and you put pen to paper on Fringes, Life on the Edge of Professional Rugby, and first-hand account of what it's like to be as a journeyman professional athlete. And obviously your experiences in the Championship have contribute a lot to the experiences that you put down on the page there. Just talk us through the process of getting to write Fringes.
I've always been like, my 2 things when I was growing up, they were always like books and sport, and rugby being my favourite sport and the sport that I sort of, committed the most effort and time to. But I was always reading, and people always kind of, it's funny, since I've written it, how many people have commented on like, you're always reading on the bus, so at least you've done something with that. But I was kind of experimenting along those lines, and kind of professionally, and also just in my own time, I did like a short fiction writing course, which again, you could say proved useful for some of the stories I made up. But
never let the truth get in the way, mate. Never let the truth get in the way.
There's more I had to leave out, really, that people would think was unbelievable. But it was. I was doing it, and I kind of got serious about it. And I approached an agent, like a book agent, and he was looking for publishing options. And he was like, "Oh, mate, like it's pretty good. Like I think it could definitely get better, but no one's going to publish this because with rugby books, they're only kind of for big name players. Like nobody really wants to commission like someone no one's ever heard of." And you see that not just in rugby, but actually in other books as well. So people quite often give an influencer in something a book contract, not because they're a good writer, but because they've got an Instagram account with a lot of people on it. And that wasn't a bad thing, because for me, I really liked having kind of complete responsibility and control over what I was doing as well. And I could do it quite quickly. So I did it. And one of the reasons as well was exactly what we're doing now. It was like, well, here's an underrepresented slice of the athlete experience that nobody hears about. And so, although it's about me and my time as a rugby player, like it's also kind of because those were who all my friends were. Like my friends were people who would have year-to-year deals and get treated, in bizarre ways, or have to just up and leave places. So I was like, well, this is a way of life that nobody, like no casual fan really like knows about, but actually there are some really good players in these divisions, in the Championship and in some of the, Pro D2 and beyond in France as well. There are loads of good players who nobody like hears about. And I kind of quite enjoyed, letting everyone know a little bit about it, because some of the sort of things around it are quite ridiculous.
So many different stories that I bet it was great fun writing it, wasn't it? So you've obviously left a few out. Is there any that you've left out that you could share with us?
Well, I don't know, maybe some of the looser ones, but it was funny because I did about 30,000 words. The whole thing's about 110,000, and I'd done about 30,000, and I was like, right, I'm in now. I'm not, it had been a bit of an experiment. Like, shall I do it? Shall I not? And I was like, no, I'm committed. So I texted our team WhatsApp group, and I was like, boys, I'm doing this. What might have I forgotten, or should I not leave out kind of thing, and just had this amazing night sat on the sofa just crying, laughing as like all these stories are coming in. It's I mean, everyone will have them, any kind of and that could potentially be another project. I think like we've explored like doing another project with canvassing other people. So if you think you've got a great story, feel free to give me a shout. But yeah, I kind of limited the book to, the book takes place like over the course of the 4 years I was in France, and like it does talk a little bit about it kind of ducks off when there's a sort of bigger topic. I'll duck off and talk about it, but there's definitely some of the sort of like championship nights out and stuff like that, which like I left out. But in the end, I had so many. Yeah, it's quite a long book, so I was like, I had so much there. I was just like, well, it's difficult for me to include everything, so I just had to make some tough decisions.
Yeah, it's I think it's amazing that you've done it, because I had a go at. I've sat down a few times to write one, and I ended up like challenging myself to write a blog for every day for a year. And not only was it good fun, and the stories you can sort of share, if you just go for it, it's good. It's quite cathartic as well, and it's good just to get it off your chest. But there's a lot of stories out there that people wouldn't believe. But it's great that you've had the balls to go and do it, and it's been well received as well. Because, like you said, you've done it all off your own back, mate, and that's like. That's amazing what you've done. #1 bestseller, and that must have been a bit of a shock of like how well it was supported. It shows us. I think we've found with this that there is an audience out there for these sort of stories, and it's being able to touch it and feel it, and it's relatable. It's not all about high performance. It's about what these guys are actually going through is quite real, and the average bloke on the street can relate to a lot of the stuff that goes on.
Yeah, it's definitely that, and I think like I had to talk. If I was going to be kind of upfront about stuff and other people, I had to be upfront about myself, and that was a little bit like concerning at times. But yeah, it's everyone wants honesty when you do stuff. So it's like you guys, you're representing like this slice of life, and you're getting guys on to speak honestly about it. And I think with athlete books, like quite often maybe the person's too high profile to be completely upfront about maybe what happened or how they felt about it, and they have to leave things out, and some of them just feel a bit inherently not dishonest. That's unfair, but you're like, oh, they're not giving you like enough. And I thought I had a good opportunity to differentiate in terms of how I spoke about these things, and also just because it wasn't that top level of the game, and I could say to everybody like, oh, this is different to all these other books just by virtue of like who I was and the level I was talking about.
You mentioned there, obviously, how well the book was received. Were you surprised by that? Obviously, the Amazon bestseller and sort of toppling other books written by, as you alluded to there, sort of bigger, perhaps better known celebrity sports stars as well at a similar time.
Or did you know, mate? Did you know it was that
good? I always knew I was destined for greatness somehow. No, I was really surprised, because like for me, when I was doing it, I was just like success for me was just finishing it and actually publishing it. And I sat on it for a while, because I was tinkering with it, and there was various things to do, like the formatting and stuff like that, which gave me kind of excuses to sort of delay. And I ended up rushing it a little bit to get it out in time for Christmas. And that must have been 2019. And it did okay for the first couple of months. And then I was just pestering people to look at it. And once we got, I think lockdown was actually a big help, because once we got locked down and sports stopped, it was a bit like, oh, what have we got to talk about? A few people looked into the book and quite enjoyed it, and it took off from there. But I never had any kind of, never had any expectations for it to do as well as it did, or I never even set myself any. I just thought I was happy with having done it and put it out there, and that was that. And it's been really great, and everyone's been. It's really fun to hear from people who have read it, and got some great emails and people who have got their own like rugby stories and stuff. It's been good.
So season 2 is not far away then, is
it? Yeah, I'd love to do like I don't think I've got enough like personal material to justify another one, but I'd love I'm thinking about ways I could maybe kind of tell like other people's stories. I'm working on a new book now, which is the Olympic 4x100 relay team that won gold in Athens. So we're working on their story, and it'll be out like pretty shortly. But in terms of, you know, rugby or, you know, that sort of that level of sport, I'd love to do another project that maybe kind of brought different people together. So if you've got something you think's good, then tell me about it.
It's chat after this, mate.
It's funny because some of those like crazy old, like the championship was real Wild West like for a bit, wasn't it? When there's a bit more money sloshing around and no one was quite sure like where to direct it. Yeah.
We just throw more cash at it, and then it was great fun.
So now, Ben, obviously,
it's fun.
Sorry.
No, you carry on.
I was just say, obviously, now, Ben, the book is done, and you say you are looking at sort of a few other projects, but you are sort of writing and content creating in the space now. How is that keeping you busy at the moment?
Yeah, again, I've been quite lucky. I've been busy like the past year or so when a lot of people haven't been. So I feel very fortunate there. And like, I've got a role with an organisation, 𝙈𝙚𝙧𝙘𝙚𝙧, which is Life After Professional Sport, helps athletes kind of make that transition into work. And I lead content for them. I am the head of content. So that's been really good. And during lockdown, we did this like webinar series of sort of various different topics with guests to help athletes do different things like do CV, optimize social media profiles, start a business, you know, kind of get ready for employment. So I do that. I kind of work freelance as well. And I've had this other book project I've been working on for the past, I don't know, that's probably since November maybe. So I've been like working on that and then doing, just trying to build out sort of and prep for other future writing projects as well. So I keep, I've been keeping busy. It's been good. I'd love to do more like of these kind of book style projects. It's just like, since I've left rugby, and I think, I don't know, Gully, you probably have, your own experiences as well, but you're like, I wasn't quite sure. I never had like a thing that I definitely wanted to do. So I had this very like, experimental year really, where I was just trying loads and loads of different things and seeing the small things I liked about each thing and just trying to kind of alight on something that grabbed me. But I really enjoy like the writing process, I suppose. So it's been great. It's just maybe a little bit more solitary than being a rugby player, but that's been what's nice about this most recent project, is that because it's collaborative, like we're almost in a little team, and it's obviously not the same, but it's still pretty it's pretty fun, and it alleviates some of the like lonely hours typing, I suppose.
Do your experiences? I mean, we had Phil Nielsen on the show last week who talked about his life after rugby. He's out in Gibraltar now, working with Gibraltar Rugby, and he kind of said that his end of rugby career was quite abrupt, and that he maybe didn't have a plan for it. And it sounds a little bit like you were sort of, there wasn't a firm plan in place. Does that reflect a lot of what the guys that you work with now at 𝙈𝙧𝙧𝙘𝙧? Is it a similar tale with the clients that you speak to?
Yeah, I think because it's a big topic for any athlete, right? And like you say, you don't know, maybe your career will end, you just won't get a contract, or you get injured or something, or maybe like I kind of, I came to the end of a contract and I half-heartedly looked at some other ones, but I could have maybe done the Hong Kong thing and I looked into that, but I had kind of personal ties back over here that I couldn't really didn't feel like I could leave behind. So it was a bit out of the blue, but we'd recommend that you make it a bit less out of the blue than that. But I had, I was qualified, I had some qualifications, had some savings, had my, family to support me as well. So it's not been, it can be quite precarious. And I think it's just a really emotive topic as well. And the thing with the lap stuff is that an athlete could be 18, they could be released by an academy and never get a deal, or maybe they'll have given up their kind of teenage years, their education a little bit, or you could be like 35, and be at the end of quite a long career. So everyone's super different. And that's the other thing, is like everyone's circumstances are different and everyone's backgrounds and stuff. So there's not really like a one size fits all, but it's definitely like get ahead of it, whatever that means for you. Is like, and it's interesting how many people find that actually helps them play. Like some people they've got something else to do, maybe they've got a little side business, or maybe they're studying for something. Some people find that actually really helps when they turn up to training, because they actually really enjoy the contrast. Whereas obviously if it's the only thing you're doing, you set so much store by each training session, by each game, it can get quite sort of overwhelming and stressful. Whereas if you have that other outlet for yourself, then not only is that a release from the sport, but the sport is a release from whatever else you're doing. So actually, some guys find that it's really helpful.
So if like, obviously this just goes beyond rugby, doesn't it? Sort of laps. It's sort of if someone was listening and they feel like they need to, they're thinking about the transition, or they're in a period now where they're injured and they're quite low, sort of, how do they get in contact with you, Ben, and like what's sort of the process for sort of a guy looking to do that, or lady?
Yeah, it's free. So any athlete, if you're a pro, semi-pro athlete, it's completely free. It's www.laps.careers. You can reach out to me personally if you want. I'm sure we'll have those details at the end, but there's loads of guys kind of affiliated with the Laps. Quite a lot of the employees are current or former athletes themselves. It was set up by a footballer Robbie Simpson, who played did he have a Premiership contract? But anyway, he played in like pretty much every tier of English football. And so it's a good organization, and the advice is free. There's job opportunities. There's kind of different things for you. Everyone can make of it what they will, and even if you look at it and decide it's not for you, it's no harm done, because you're not going to have paid anyone. Like, one of the things is it'll never charge an athlete for help. So yeah.
I think what you've talked about brings us on to a sort of wider conversation, and something that Gully and I were quite keen to touch on, but I think we don't mind admitting we're not entirely sure the best way to go about it, but a conversation around mental health in rugby, and obviously specific to our space, Championship Rugby. It is Mental Health Awareness Week this week. I know that, Ben, you've blogged, I think referencing some quotes from Kiernan Mile, formerly of Wasps and Sale, with his experiences about how we need to be maybe better with the language that we use around mental health and mental illness, and so on and so forth. In terms of a professional rugby outside the very top flight, which is where your book was positioned, what do you think there needs to be done better around the subjects, or what comments do you have around it? I know it's quite an expansive question.
Yeah, again, it's quite difficult. Like that, my championship experiences in particular, there may be one or two physios for a whole squad of players, and obviously that's your physical health, but the physical health is the only thing that most teams look after. And if they've only got the kind of finances and time and capacity for one person to look after 30 pros' physical health, they're not going to provide any mental health support or anything like that. So that's obviously poor, and things like things need to be done. And even at the top level, people find that those services might be kind of under provisioned, but that's the reality. And it means that as a player and as a group of players, everyone needs to get better, both with their own sort of systems and by helping their mates, because it's hard to say, but your team or whoever, they're not doing it. So if you don't do it and help each other out, like, no one's going to do it for you, and you're going to be the one that suffers. It's not going to be somebody else. And and I think it is that. I think rugby's definitely improved, and you can see that from who speaks out about it. And some people decline going on international rugby tours because they say they've got other things going on, which is amazing. Like, no one would have ever done that not that long ago, or they'd have been regarded extremely suspiciously if they did. But
they still are now to a certain degree, mate. They still
that's what I'm saying. I was like, they definitely are still regarded like that, and there is still an element of like, like, you're supposed to be a tough bloke, aren't you? So
I think I think we've got the awareness around it all is a lot better, and I think sort of where we need to get to a stage is sort of being able to. Often people say, like, the door's always open, and that's a great expression. But I think so you've also got to go and find people and reach out to people as well. So it's your responsibility to look after your fellow person, or your teammate, or if you're in a good spot, and it's the small conversations, reaching out to people is massive. And it's you don't often realise the tiniest little conversations can just flip your mood positively. Someone, I've had like so many injuries over the years and went through a lot of battles sort of off field, and I think someone said to me like, "Oh mate, you're a pretty resilient bloke," and it was like, well, no one's ever said that to me before. And it pumped my tyres a bit, and I felt good. I was like, yeah, actually, all of that was worth it. But it's just those small little conversations that you can have with people can mean so much to the person that's receiving them. And I think you have as many as those and as often as you can. I think it's little and often is a great approach to it.
No, I agree. I think, and that like little text even, like, oh, how are you? It's like, oh, no one's asked, like, and I think, like, interesting what you said, things like injury and particularly, lower division rugby where you do live year to year quite often. And you are actually a lot more resilient than you probably think you are, just because your context is different. Like, you're around other players and stuff, and injury is really tough, and like, I was very fortunate. I never had like a very long-term injury. I only ever had kind of decent muscle tears. So like a couple of months here, a couple of months there, but never did anything more severe than that. And even 2 months I found like quite tough, because you did feel like, oh, I'm on my own. I'm not, and particularly in France where the away trips could be 12 hours travel, everyone would go for 2-3 days and it'd be you and whoever else was like left back there for the weekend. You just think, oh, right. Like, it is just me sat here, and what else is there to do apart from go on the piss? But yeah, it's like, it's like, you need to kind of, like you say, it's like, until teams, governing bodies, whoever it is, until they do a better job, like, the reality is it's players, and it's partly, the language that we use around it, but it's also, and like when I left Plymouth, I found myself for the first time in my life with nothing to do. And it wasn't like when I left Cornish Pirates where I didn't have anything to do, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. When I left Plymouth, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. It's just no one would let me do it. So I was like, right, well, I found it incredibly frustrating, but I didn't have the personal tools and frameworks and language to really explain how I was feeling to anyone. So I just sort of got on with it, and people, and looking back on it, I can tell people found it tough to speak to me, because I never gave them a way in to I never gave them a way to approach me with it. I must have been a very kind of closed off, that's what I presented. But in fact, I'd have loved if someone had said something like that to me, like you said, it would have been a massive help to me, but I didn't give anyone a way to do that. So it's like, it's not all on you, but if you kind of learn those ways of kind of letting people broach the topic with you, like you're there, like people are more able to help you if and when you have a problem.
Yeah.
That makes any sense.
And that skill is very, very difficult, isn't it, to learn? And it's a little bit that comes with age and experience. But if we can get to a stage where, you're more experienced players or coaches or whoever it is, the support network within the group, within a championship team, say, because the funding's not there to support it. It's sort of on ourselves as individuals to learn those skills and share experiences of that within the group format. And I think that can definitely help. And I think like injury, like the two biggest flags, sort of, I think within rugby and within sort of affecting your mood and your mental health, is around selection, injury, and contracts. Those three things, and that can really affect someone positively or negatively. And like for me, from my experiences, contracts were always sort of went okay for me until towards the end, but I was sort of prepared for that. But the injury side of it is such a lonely slog, shit place. And like you say, like what is it to do? I'll go on the piss, because that's all there is to do. And they're the flags, aren't they? They're the signs. It's like, fuck, right, we need to look after this boy. And if someone, that's where I think we could kind of get into in general. Is, I don't know if it's the same at the moment, like within the sport, if that's a young person's mentality, but it definitely was with our sort of age group.
I think with the medical staff as well, like we said, because there tends to be one physio, two physios, And I remember in France, in the last year I was in France, and it wasn't when I was injured, but the physio said to me, well, I was the vice captain of the team. So, but me and him were we used to get on pretty well. And he said, I'm really worried about the team. And I was like, what do you mean? And you just realize that the physios are the ones who take the temperature of the team, because they're the ones who are alone with everyone at their kind of vulnerable low points. And actually, if they have, one or two people, maybe the long-term injured people are a bit like, at least they get that interaction with the physio, but that's understandable. But the physio is actually an amazing kind of temperature taker for the health of the whole squad, because if everyone who's fit and available and playing is not having a good time, the physio is the one who notices, maybe not the coach. And I know, like, it's a long time since I played championship rugby, but it wasn't a, because I think the coaches were guys that came up in a different era. It was pretty harsh, and you'd get subjected, like your mate did, to some sort of pretty tough, lines of questioning, or you'd kind of get tested in ways that, and with some guys, they couldn't handle it. The day-to-day digs and stuff, it's not for everyone. And it is I don't know if that's different with the younger generation of coaches, but I'm not that convinced it is. I think there's probably some environments where it is, and others because you only learn from what's come before you. So if what you've experienced is something, you'll probably do the same thing.
Yeah, it's fascinating, really, isn't it? We could keep going on this for hours.
Yeah, I sat there with several questions that I thought of interjecting there, but I thought that was really powerful from both of you, from two people that have obviously been involved in the sphere for many, many years. Ben, you've been a great guest. Before we go, where can people buy the book if they'd like to read it?
Grab it on Amazon. Yeah, Fringes, Life on the Edge of Professional Rugby. Grab it on Amazon. Look me up on Twitter. I'm BCE Mercer. And just get in touch. And like I say, if you've got a story you think the world might want to hear, let me know. I'm working on a few different ideas at the minute, but nothing set in stone. So yeah, I'd love to hear from anyone that's got some perspective on this sort of stuff.
Cool. Cheers, Ben.
Awesome. Cheers, guys.
That was the Championship Club podcast with Michael Casey and Ben Gulliver. Check us out on social media at Champ Clubs Pod on Instagram and Twitter, and subscribe and like our YouTube channel.